didn't get the money from PAYE freelance. So for me, manufacturing, aerospace, the whole industry has stopped. So in that sense, the government have shut the country down from working, hence no contracts, no future work. Things are just starting to open up again, but that's a long time. And there needs to be some mechanisms in place to support these extremes and, the gaps.
Anthony, yours has been quite a tale there of sort of one sort of dilemma or issue on top of another. So what do you think, as we take this message back, what could help you or support you? What do you think could be fair or at least be taken into account?
Well, I think if you look at the way it's worked for self-employed, the income support schemes, there are mechanisms there. And I believe those mechanisms should apply to directors as well, for the £2,500 a month or a one-off payment to compensate the gaps. But also we do have accounts of, going back 3 years. We can demonstrate that. And I believe it would need a one-off payment. And it's simple as that, really, in my estimation. I took a small bounce-back loan, very small, mortgage payment holiday, which runs out the end of October. So things are going to get very difficult and tricky.
And how do you see the future for you? It's 6 months in. How do you see things by the time we get to Christmas? Because now we've all got to think, what are we going to do over the next 3 months? Where do we get the money? Where do we get the job? That word, pivot. Where do we find those new income streams for ourselves? What are you going to do?
Well, November, it's cliff edge for me, and I've, spent most of my savings, 9 months, no work and no help. And we're asking for help off the government to identify the cracks and give us a cash injection to reboost the economy, businesses, and let's get back to work and do a good job and bring the country back. Because if we're not helped, a lot of people are going to fall off that cliff, and it's now when we need to get ahead of the queue because we've been missed. And you do know, obviously, with all the support that's been given out for the furlough, that stops in October. And it's just going to impact upon impact, and we need help now.
So what do you think is the month by which you think, I don't know how I'm going to cope? Is it October, November, December?
I've mentally made a decision, and I think that's an important word that's not been discussed here today, mental health. I've mentally made a decision that next April, if my business has not had any support and has not increased sufficiently enough, I'm closing it. And that's 20 people who rely on me, plus my accountant, my web company, my local all the other businesses that get money from me as well, because mentally this has been tough. I've got a strong business. I'm going to be honest with you now, I could probably last past next April, because I've been working since I was 16 and I've saved religiously every month. So I'm strong in that respect. But mentally, I've had to put a date in my head, because them not supporting me in any way makes me feel like my business is not important. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I feel unimportant. I feel like I've never claimed anything, ever, in my life. I've never claimed the dole, and I feel unimportant. I feel forgotten. Even if he just said to me, okay, you know what, because you filed after the 19th, I have ballsed up on that. I am going to go back and let you claim your 4,000. That mentally, it's not going to save my business £4,000, but mentally it's going to give me the will to go on and fight. I'm now at 20% turnover of what I was, but I'm working 18 hours a day for 20% of what I used to earn. And there's only so much a person can do that for. And I've said in my mind, I will continue. I've got a daughter, she's 7. She's never seen me in the last 6 months. I'm fighting with Gina. I'm either campaigning or at my desk till like 2 in the morning, hustling for 20% of what I used to earn. And with no support and with no acknowledgement of that, come April, I'm closing.
Well, those are very powerful words, and I'm glad you've said them, and I'm glad we've all heard them. I'm sure there's lots of people thinking, the same thing. But maybe, oh yeah, go on, get to the mic.
And I will be shorter this time, obviously.
No, go on.
This is a societal issue, but an individual issue, because everybody's stories are different, as we've said. We're looking to fit national, a country of 60, 70 million people within a scheme which is going to give as much support as we can. The point that you were making, I think, is what this is quite a unique financial issue in that people who in January were doing reasonably comfortably and had the outgoings to match that level of business, it's fallen off a cliff. So in terms of, and I understand the point in terms of the fairness of what you're saying, but whatever the figure has to be to make it absolutely, that you're going to have difficulties no matter figure across the way. So what I think is that I will be going back and I will be saying that the circumstances that you are outlining, and we do this all the time because of the different people within our seats who mirror your problems, is we have to look at a way of compensating people now. But none of you have a business if we don't open up the economy. So the societal issue is we're creating something completely different, because it's a bit like the furlough scheme. The furlough scheme is great and I support the furlough scheme, but if the point of the furlough scheme is simply at the end of it for everybody to be made redundant, it pays people's mortgages and people's life for 3, 6, 9, 12 months. But you have to have the economy. And one of the interesting questions I was going to ask you, which again we can't do because we're here all night, is your attitudes to the coronavirus and your attitudes to putting yourself in a work environment. Somebody mentioned in schools. Are you willing to go into schools? Because if you're not willing to go into schools, we really have got some major problems in terms of how, and I'm not picking on that for any particular reason. You see, I'm a politician who argues that we should open up. It's your choice, but we should give you, on the basis you have the medical evidence, you have the scientific evidence which we all share, but you should have that choice in terms of whether you want to do this or not. It gets back down to closing businesses, but also in respect of whatever your views or anybody's views on the pandemic or whatever we want to call it. It's going to mean that for your businesses and other people's businesses to go forward, you're going to have to make questions or make decisions regarding your own health and your family's health, which I think the government are making far too many of those decisions on behalf of you, when you should be making those decisions. The whole point of being self-employed is you take responsibility for your actions, you take responsibility for what you want to do.
And that is the debate that we're now talking about, because trust me, if you are all telling me you cannot last past, I don't know, October, November, December, and this is the economy gone, this is jobs gone and never coming back, it is with a sense of urgency now we look at how we support our businesses and the sector, because remember, we need to pay for the NHS as well. We need to keep everything, all of the wheels oiled. Gina, I'm going to end on you. I hope I've kind of kept to time. All the stories were so fascinating that I wanted to make sure that we heard everybody.
Before you start, can I say three?
Yeah, of course you can.
Number one, before we start with the self-employed and the limited companies, there's going to be 500,000 new unemployed by the end of November anyway. So that's the sort of first thing to remember. Secondly, I just reiterate that point about October being important when you campaign and lobby your MPs. And don't say 3 million people fall through, say 1 in 10, because that's what it is. It's 1 in 10 people in employment or in receipt of income who are falling through the cracks. Make it very plain so people understand it. We've got a big battle beginning in November, but I don't think it's anything like beyond winning.
I think I thank everybody for coming here today to explain. This is a very small number of the stories that we've been hearing day in, day out, how acute the problem is for our segment, how many millions of jobs rely upon the business owners. And you made a very eloquent point about the furlough scheme and all the money that's been pumped into it. Keeping those jobs open to the end of October will be fruitless if the businesses they're employed by then go bust in November. People's mental health is at breaking point. So you're absolutely right, David. The tax base is going to drop. The welfare bill is going to increase. The burden on the NHS will be absolutely enormous. This is a room full of entrepreneurs, risk takers, innovators, who will be squashed flat? Will they start another business? You know, it's really acute, and I would really urge Rishi Sunak and the Treasury to engage with us, talk to us. We've offered solutions, whether that be paying us on our dividends as their own advisory committee recommend, or looking at other options, of which we've suggested many. You know, we just want to be here to help power the economy out of this crisis. We're really hard-working individuals, and we can drive the economy into a more V-shaped recovery, but only if we're here.
Well, I think we end on that note. We can drive the economy forward, but only if we're still here in existence.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
Well said.
Can I just say, Esther, this is the biggest audience I've had for 6 months. Can I do a little bit of...
Rishi, thanks for seeing us today. Obviously, quite a few questions from the blue collar group, from self-employed people and small businesses. And I guess they all say is the Conservative Party has always been the party of small business and the self-employed. After COVID, how are we going to make sure that the Conservative Party remains the champion for those people?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Esther. We always have been the party of small business, and rightly so, right? There's nothing more admirable than people giving up that security of the regular paycheck to take a risk and do something entrepreneurial, put in all those tough hours when it's not going so well at the beginning to build something great. And that's what my mum did, and it's something I've got enormous admiration for. So what do we do, to your question? Well, first we need to make sure all our small businesses can have survived this crisis so that they're still there to bounce back. One of the things that I'm really pleased we did was put in place our Bounce Back Loan Programme, which allowed small businesses to get a fully government guaranteed loan, something we've never done before, pretty easily at the click of a button, and get up to £50,000 in their bank account to help them tide through this period. We recently announced a change to that programme so that instead of having to pay those loans back over 5 years, we've stretched that out to 10 years, and that will mean that the monthly repayment drops by almost half, meaning that all our small businesses, and 1 million of them took these loans, will have that little bit of extra cash every month that they can use for running their business, for employing their staff, rather than paying back those loans so quickly. So I think that will make a really big difference. And I think the other thing is business rates. You know, when I talk about my small high street businesses, the thing that they most complain to me about is business rates. Obviously this year, if you're a retail business, hospitality, leisure business, small pub, small restaurant, small high street retailer in Market Town, you are not paying any business rates this year. And I know that's been an enormous help to people to just give them that boost, and that lasts all the way through to next spring.
And I'll put a little request here. Before you come forward with future ideas, most people would say, and we don't want that coming back. We want a new way of sort of doing tax, but on a fairer one that sort of takes the online as well as the high street and not on business rates. You might not answer me straight away, but I'm getting that request in for all the blue collar people.
No, that's right. And we just actually have a consultation out on that particular question. One of our manifesto commitments was to review the business rate system. Now, it's not easy to do. I'm going to be honest with all your team. We raise quite a lot of money from business rates to pay for public services, and it's just not easy to figure out what you could do to tweak that while still getting the cash we need to pay for the NHS or schools or police. But there's lots of options in the consultation. One of them is an online sales tax, as you mentioned. That's one of the ideas that people have put forward. So we've asked for people for their views on that, and indeed any other views they have on business rates, how we can reform the system.
And I think that's what people need to know, that you are listening, that you can adjust, that you can do more changes and support as the need grows, which you've done. And furlough, people will say that really did help our business. I think there's a group of people who felt they haven't been supported, and I'm going to say yet. People who ran their own businesses, sole traders, there were various people who would say they fell through the cracks. Going forward, is there something you can do for them?
Well, you're right. I've said very candidly in the past and apologised to those people, we haven't been able to help everyone in exactly the way they would have liked, and sometimes it's just practically very difficult to do, and we need to make sure we also protect the taxpayer, and there are some times we just can't put systems in place. Now, but I have everyone in my mind all the time, and what I would say is, even if you haven't been helped in exactly the way you want, there's almost certainly something that we've done that could benefit you, whether it's, we've made enormous improvements to the way our welfare system operates this year temporarily to help those who are most vulnerable. For those who are struggling with paying the mortgage or paying rent, we've made major changes. People have had up to 6 months mortgage holiday. We organised with all our big banks that they could provide that to people. That's been a lifeline. 1 in 6 mortgages took up that offer, for example. But you're right more broadly. Look, I will always keep innovating and iterating. As we go through this crisis, as the economy evolves, we have to keep adjusting the nature of our support, making sure that it's always targeted at where it can do the most good.
And I think people need to hear that, particularly some of those self-employed people or people who had a limited company who didn't get support, and they need to know they've got a company there going forward. And that's why I say COVID really has thrown the country and the world into upheaval, into change. So how do we, because some of these businesses would like to see the economy open back up, really is key for these businesses to survive.
You're right. I mean, the most sustainable way we can support business and indeed protect jobs and employment is to have an open economy where businesses are able to trade, customers are able to come and purchase goods and services. I mean, we're all conservatives, we believe in a market economy. That's the only long-term way we can have things working, is that we can't nationalise and pay everyone's bills forever and a day. It's just simply not possible. So how do we get to that point? Well, a couple of things. One is testing. I think that's the big thing that the Prime Minister's talked about rightly. Obviously, the more testing capacity we have, the more effective our test, track and trace operation can be. That's something that gives us an ability to suppress the spread of the virus whilst having as much of our normal lives back to, our lives back to normal as possible, which is why we've spent now, I think £12 billion on our test and trace system. It's an enormous sum of money to improve testing capacity, and we can continue to do more, and we will. I think the second thing is COVID secure guidelines, right? This is something that, as the Prime Minister said, will be a feature of our lives for some time. We've all had to make some adjustments about how we do things. What I would say is, we've got to accept some differences to how we do things, and we should all just try and do that to the best of our ability, so that we can keep as much of the economy open as possible, right? None of us want to see things being shut down and not open, but our ability to do that is a function of us being able to suppress the virus everywhere else.
And I think businesses are also asking support maybe through training, through adapting to this new online age, which COVID has really accelerated. Are we going to do more of that?
Yes, so the good news is we've already started, and what we did in July in my plan for jobs was announce for businesses a £2,000 cash incentive to small and medium-sized businesses especially, to take on a young apprentice. And that's an amazing opportunity for the business because they get an enormous cash bonus for doing so. We also, as government, pay 95% of the training costs for small and medium-sized businesses if they take on an apprentice. I think it's right that the company makes a small contribution so they have some skin in the game. But right now, what I'd say to these businesses, go online, look at the apprenticeship service, see if you can take on a young apprentice. You'll get £2,000 for doing so. The government will pay the vast majority of the training. You'll be providing that person with an enormous opportunity going forward and giving them the skills they need in the workplace to succeed in life. And that was never more important than right now, when many young people especially have been disadvantaged by what's going on in our economy right now.
And again, I'll put a request in here as well, is that's great because we're talking about jobs and giving young people a chance and opportunity. But I think it's also training within the business as they're adapting and sort of changing and dealing with going online.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. And we obviously have already the apprenticeship levy, and I think there's been various representations that were made about how we could improve the way that levy works. The Prime Minister spoke about that earlier this week, and I think that there's some things that we can clearly look at. And the Prime Minister talked about that to improve how the levy funds are used to give businesses more flexibility, because that's what we want. Ultimately, I think it's right that companies invest in training, and actually this is one of the things that as a country we don't do as well as competitors on in terms of in-work training. The levy was designed to help address that. that, but now we need to make sure that it works flexibly. It works both for employees who are getting the training, but also for businesses.
Yeah, because businesses have said in the past, we agree, we know what we're doing, we know what it's about, but at the moment it's a bit like a tax. Can we have flexibility so it really works for our staff, for our business, and we can develop and grow? So that's great to hear that you're putting the flexibilities in there. Now, another flexibility, and this is coming up right now, and it came up when we were in Keighley, again, a request about the 10 p.m. curfew, the time 10 p.m. So many people are saying if it was 10:30, we could have had 2 sittings. The 10 o'clock just stops us doing anything. Is the movement there? Can I push you on an answer on that?
No, well, sadly, I don't have new news for you, Esther, on this. And I know it's difficult, and I can very much see why people are frustrated by it. And it was a decision that was taken because we believed it would make a difference to the situation. Now, and it's in common with what lots of other countries have done. All countries have, some have done a bit earlier than 10 actually, some have done a bit later, most have done around 10. So, it's there or thereabouts. I know it's frustrating, but I think as the Prime Minister said, a stitch in time saves 9. And if we can just knuckle down right now and just keep this thing under control, I think that gives us far more options for the future. And it gets back to what we were talking about before. What we all want to see is just a more open economy with more of our lives as normal as possible. But in the short term, we just need to keep a lid on this thing, and that hopefully will help us do that.
And I think it's that flexibility, though, listening to what businesses are saying, opening up the economy, and of course you're taking the advice from, chief medical officers, science advisors. I get all that, but it is understanding that it is seeing it in the round, opening up the economy because of future issues with what could come forward with poverty, closing down businesses, people not having their job.
And I think you make an absolutely excellent point, and that's right. And we've got to look at this in the round. And the costs of coronavirus are far wider than just the number of people who are affected by coronavirus. All those things you mentioned are important as well. They should be in our heads as we make all of these decisions. What's happening to our children's ability to learn, university students' ability to progress in their studies, what's happening to unemployment and poverty, as you said. That has enormous impact on people's life, their families, and indeed their health. Long term, if people are poorer, it's going to have impact on chronic illness. We already know people have been missing appointments because of what's going on. And all of those things need to be in our minds as we make these decisions.
And we are the party of levelling up. We are the party talking about infrastructure spend. Going around the country, people are saying now we need that digital infrastructure. We need that technical infrastructure. What we don't want to see is a digital divide. People will also talk about the iPads that you need on top for kids if they're having to learn at home, but really it is that digital infrastructure. How are we going to make sure that the UK is, a country that is outward looking, global, and has that infrastructure?
Yeah, I think you're spot on about all those things. So I think the good news is we're really making progress on this, and we as Conservatives should be really proud of both our record and our ambitions in this space. So firstly, what have we said? We said we're going to spend billions of pounds, up to £5 billion, making sure that the last 20% of the country will get full fibre broadband when they otherwise might not have got it, because a private company might not have come and installed it in a small town or in a rural area like mine in North Yorkshire. And we're going to make sure that that everyone is going to have access to full fibre or gigabit capable broadband in over the coming Parliament. So that's exciting. That'll make an enormous difference. I think the second thing is mobile phone signal. Again, I speak as someone who represents a rural area. We're creating something called a shared rural network, which will mean in all those places where you don't get any phone signal, we're working with the operators to install a communal network to provide signal in those areas where it doesn't make sense for the individual operator to do it because there's not enough people, but we're going to step in, work with all of them to create that. That will unlock innovation in all these areas. So I think those are two really big things. The Prime Minister spoke just recently about digital boot camps, which we've been trialling in different parts of the country that we're going to scale up, providing young people with digital skills in conjunction with employers. I think that's a really exciting program. We need to make sure our young people are equipped with the skills they need to succeed in the new digital age. And then lastly, commitment to R&D. You talked about global Britain and our openness to the world and the importance of innovation, that's something we've always been really good at in this country. We're a nation that has created so many things and given them to the world, and the government is committed to doubling R&D spend. And that sounds a bit wonky, but that's an enormous, enormous commitment of resources into science, into research, into innovation. And I don't know exactly what that will throw up, but I'm really confident that it will be British scientists, inventors that discover new products, new services that are going to transform the world and create jobs here at home.
What do you think of your new name, Dishi Rishi?
Well, yeah, I mean, so my wife has more chuckles about it than I do, but no, I think what's more important than that is I think it's important in politics if we're doing things that you can try and connect with the people that we have the privilege to represent. And I've tried lots of different things. You're brilliant at this on social media and communicating with people, and obviously you've spent your career doing it, and it's good for us to take some lessons from you, Esther, that we can sit in these offices and come up with policies, but unless we can communicate them to everyone in the country and make them feel that they're relevant to their everyday lives, then we're not doing our job properly.
And that's why I say it's a two-way street, and that's why we're going around the country to speak to people who run businesses, so that I have got this opportunity to come in here and say to you, heard about opening up the economy, what support they're going to get, what are we doing about the digital divide, and what about, is 10 p.m. or 10:30 the right time? So you need to listen, which is what you're showing here, and having the flexibility to change. And that's what people need to see, and we need to be doing as a party.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and that's why you and your group is such a great idea. It's what conference is all about. I know it's slightly different this year, but that's normally where we'd all be together. We'd be exchanging these ideas, we'd be having this debate, this dialogue that's so vital for the health of our party, making sure that we get our policies right and they reflect our values and make a difference to people on the ground. I think we should be really proud as Conservatives over what we've done over the past 6 months. The country was hit by something extraordinary, and as a party and as a government, we've stepped up. We've provided a lot of support to people who really needed it. We've tried to keep the economy going. We're making difficult decisions, and of course we're not going to get everything absolutely right, but as you said, as long as we're listening and adjusting and are flexible, we'll get through this together, and the blue collar Conservatives will play a really important part in that. And I think your supporters and what you're doing is fantastic, helps me do my job, helps the Prime Minister, and I'm just enormously grateful for all your support and all your team's ideas. And delighted that you are in Yorkshire, which is the most important news of the day. So thanks for having me.
Welcome to Blue Collar Conversations and our final night of conference. We're here at the Blue Boar in Westminster, and tonight I've brought on the big guns for the final show. We've got here the co-founder of the Blue Collar Conservative Movement, that is Clark Vasey, and we've also brought back by popular demand, mainly by his colleagues because they wanted Friday night off, and that is Paul Baldwin from The Express. And this is a part of the show where we talk about what you've had to say in your opinions, and trust me, you've had a lot to say about Margaret Ferrier. She is the SNP MP who, knowing that she had COVID, travelled on public transport, and people are saying, like Ray Booty, we need to sack her, remove her, she needs the full force of the law to come down on her. But we'll be talking about that a little bit later on. Now, we've just heard from the Chancellor, and I asked him, is the Conservative Party still the party of the self-employed and small businesses? Clark, as co-founder of the Blue Collar Movement, are we?
I don't want to get myself in trouble, but we've got to be, because if we're not the party for people who are working hard like that, then really what are we? And yeah, I think we're right to ask ourselves that question now, because, small businesses have had the worst of this crisis, and are looking ahead. They're not sure about what's coming next. We need to show them that we're on their side in the future. They've been through a lot. We've got to start thinking about where they go next. We'll get a lot of talk about when we start talking about things like tax cuts to help these businesses out and saying, can it be afforded? Well, actually, these guys have already paid the price of it, and we've got to get as much tax off these guys, get them back to doing business, because it's the restrictions they don't want. They want to do their business. They're not after state handouts. We need to be getting back, cutting their taxes, getting back to normal. That means probably looking to Sweden as quickly as possible, getting these businesses operating as normal. That's what we need to be doing, and that will prove that with the party of small business.
And I have to be honest, going round the country at the start of the year, I can't tell you how many people said to me this was going to be their best year ever. They'd had sort of delays, and they'd had all the Brexit, and then Brexit had been completed the 31st of January, and all money that had maybe been held up, or orders for goods that had been delayed were now coming forward. So they weren't expecting, basically, the government to close their business down. So there's nothing that these businesses have done wrong. There was nothing wrong with the businesses. It wasn't that they weren't profitable. Because of the pandemic, we closed them down. And we've got to take responsibility for that, haven't we?
Absolutely. In Britain, we are brilliant at being entrepreneurial, and we're going to need this post-Brexit more than ever before, as far as I'm concerned. And as you say, prior to the to lockdown, I was talking to space companies. You know, we think Britain has space companies. We do. We have in Scotland makes more than a third of the world's satellites, which is mind-blowing, really. That sort of stuff. Today, don't want to bang on about Blackburn again, but two guys in Blackburn who opened a garage about 30 years ago bought Asda today, and that's a spirit of that's an entrepreneurial spirit, a magnificent effort, and they now employ 32,000 people, I think it is, and now with Asda, I don't know, you know, so many thousands more, and that is going to be so vital to the recovery of this nation. And can we afford it? We can't not afford it. We cannot not afford it. Whatever we need to do to keep that spirit of entrepreneurialism and business going, then we need to do. And if that is cut, we're going to have to think. We're going to have to come up with some clever ideas, and Rishi might be the man, because he's not put a foot wrong really so far. But you know, brakes on national insurance, brakes on other business taxes. It's going to have to happen to keep that business going.
I think if we don't support these businesses and the forgotten limited group that represents 2 million businesses and employing several million more people, you have to say, would you really want to set up a business now? Would then we be killing off the age of the entrepreneur? If people felt, well, I tried everything, I've put my heart and soul into this for however many years, it's been closed down fundamentally because of the pandemic. And I think that's what we've got to be mindful of. We cannot stop, as you say, that entrepreneurial spirit, because that brings, I think it's like 270 billion into our economy, all those people giving it a go. And we're always a nation of shopkeepers, weren't we, having a go. Well, look, I know some of you might have seen the Rishi interview a little bit earlier on, but here's just a small clip of what he had to say.
We always have been the party of small business, and rightly so, right? There's nothing more admirable than people giving up that security of the regular paycheck to take a risk and do something entrepreneurial, put in all those tough hours when it's not going so well at the beginning to build something great. And that's what my mum did, and it's something I've got enormous admiration for.
And when we think about how we're going to help these companies, it wasn't that they did anything wrong. When some people weren't eligible for support because they paid themselves by dividends, that was legal. They were allowed to do that. Their accountants had done their books that way. And I think we've got to be mindful of that, and then looking forward, even if we couldn't help them earlier on in the year, looking forward for what we can do.
I think we've got to, that's why we were talking about tax cuts. That's why we've got to look at tax cuts, because if we get to the idea of state dependency for companies have got a lot of money off the state at the moment. It's kept a lot of them going, and more of them are likely to come out the other side because of it. Not all of them will, but if you are encouraging these businesses to be more dependent on the state, what is the state going to do for me? What more money is government going to give me? Then you are hammering away at that entrepreneurial spirit as well. Because you go into business to make the money for yourself, because you want to take the risks and you want to have the rewards. You don't do it because you think I'm owed a living by the government. So as soon as we get back to that, getting the state off their backs, getting the taxes off them, allowing them, because don't forget the economy isn't what money the government has, it's what people are producing. And if we get the businesses going, then we're going to grow that economy. That's going to mean more tax revenues. So we've got to be lowering taxes. We've got to be getting back to our principles and our values, to be allowing the businesses to really go for it, create the jobs, and that's what's going to turn around this country.
And that is the key thing, isn't it? The government doesn't have money. It is the wealth creators who create the money for us. And I think that's why the lockdown and the curfews and certain areas not being able to do what they should be doing. You know, they say now with this 10 o'clock curfew, a quarter of our pubs might disappear. That's billions and billions of pounds we're losing. And it's not just money, it is about going out, it is about socialising, it is about having fun, it is doing what human beings do. But, you know, you were amazed, Paul, that when there was a vote in the House the other day, and you said the more you thought about it, the more angry you were, that some say, no, you can't just have draconian laws pushed through, you MPs must vote on it and have a debate on it.
I was almost as apoplectic as Lindsay Hoyle this morning. I don't know if you saw him, but
yeah.
and indeed over that matter, it felt absolutely spineless that a lot of these backbenchers who've been giving it a big talk for days and days and days about we must have a say in the decision-making process, just keeled up, with the exception of your good self and your less better.
Oh, hang on, better half. What's going on?
Your other half.
That's why I've separated you. That's why he's not here tonight, because I could see you were going to gang up on me and you got Clark instead.
The very idea, Esther. No, I think you said there were 6 MPs who
from the Conservative Party, and there were some from the Labour Party. But did you know the Labour Party were on a 3-line whip to abstain? So it's like Labour. Now this to me does remind me a little bit of Brexit. The biggest issue of the day, and Labour didn't have an opinion and they've abstained. Well, surely COVID lockdowns, whether you're having laws pushed through without people voting on them, surely that's the biggest decisions of the day. And I'm afraid Keir and Labour have decided they're going to abstain from all of this, because fundamentally they do agree with lockdowns.
To a non-politician, the whole thing looked absolutely spineless on both sides of the house, I have to say, and it seems vital to me and you know, the man or woman on the Clapham Omnibus, I think, that the decisions have to be seen to be taken in public, and the more minds you can get around that decision, the better. You do not want what we've got at the moment, which is a small cabal making decisions in secret. It's like the Politburo. You know, it's not good for democracy, and it's not good for faith in the system. And faith in the system, where coronavirus is concerned right now, is becoming increasingly vital, because people are just stopping believing the stuff that's coming out of Number 10 and flouting the law as a you know, matter of course.
I think it's the arbitrary nature. So why 10 o'clock and not 10:30 or 11 o'clock? People don't really understand that. I mean, to be fair, when I was speaking to the Chancellor, I said, you know, you do be listening to us, be in listening mood, and if things need to change, you do know that you're going to have to do that. And to be fair, he said, yes, we will, and we know that. Because, you know, restaurateurs have said to me, Esther, we now definitely need 2 sittings, because you're only allowing about 60-70% of the people in the restaurant because of social distancing. So if we don't have 2 sittings and closing at 10 will probably mean we only have 1 sitting, we can't survive.
Yeah, and that doesn't just mean those businesses, that means those jobs as well. You know, because it is the wealth contributors that create the economy that we use for our taxes, but it's also, you know, working people as well. We all pay our taxes, and there's more of those people who are unfortunately not going to be able to do that and have those jobs to come back to, unless we start thinking about what do we do to get us back to normal, to where we need to be, because that's what we need. You know, we've got to, you know, sort of take on the challenge of the virus in front of us, but we've also got to get back to normal, learn how to live with it if needs be, get the economy moving, because people's livelihoods are going to be upended by this. That is going to destroy lives, and you know, we shouldn't be downplaying the human cost of not getting back to normal.
And then the poll we had, still on the theme of COVID, was, do you think there is one rule for them and one rule for us when it comes to sort of COVID and the rules that are being laid down? And actually that poll came back and people said, yes, we do. Express readers said, yes, we do. We think 94% of them said, yes, there is one rule for them and one rule for us. And do you think that's coming across now? So when they see an SNP MP, Margaret Ferrier, who, could you believe it, she thought she was getting COVID, so much so that she took a test, but she decided to come down to London, go to Parliament, speak to everybody. Then she had it confirmed she was positive, and she got on a train and went back to Scotland. I mean, that's unbelievable.
It is the worst possible case of do as I do and not as I say, do as I say and not as I do. You know, this is a woman who, you know, not only was, you know, sort of a cheerleader for, you know, the kind of draconian measures and lockdowns, but she, you know, knew she was at risk. She knew that she had it. You know, with all of we can all have different views about masks and, you know, how much to lock down. But if you've got it, you know you've got it. And for her to have done that was unconscionable. To, you know, to put other people at risk. You know, and especially with given what she supposedly believed about the lockdown.
And what do you think? Would it have been different if she'd have been an MP who voted against it all, who didn't agree with it, who hadn't maybe been calling for other people to lose the job? Would there have been a difference if she'd have been an MP who said, I don't believe with this COVID restrictions?
I don't think your political point of view on COVID counts for anything. She knew what she was doing. It's a whole. Nicola Sturgeon went straight in and said, "Oh yeah, it's just like Dominic Cummings, isn't it? Trying to make some political capital out of it." It's not. It's so much worse than Dominic Cummings because she knew she was infected. She knew she was a carrier, and she got on a train from London to Scotland, and she just didn't care. And that is, as Lindsay Hoyle said, it was reckless. I think that's putting it really lightly.
I was going to say, you don't have
criminal.
You don't have to be a lawmaker in any way here. I mean, this is common sense, wasn't it? You have the infection, therefore you don't pass it on. I mean, that's what this was about, wasn't it? This was passing it on.
There's a lot of people who are now talking more about looking to Sweden. You know, Sweden has a different approach to this virus, but it's not a free-for-all. It's not like you've got COVID, go knock yourselves out, you can just go anywhere. There are sensible restrictions on people. And if you know that you have tested positive for an infectious virus, getting on a train is literally about the one thing you ought not to be doing. I'm just going to sort of, on the way to the station, the train, on the way to where I live, I'm going to put all these people at risk because, well, you know, I don't care because I'm more important.
And I mean, the Express readers also brought up, you know, Corbyn having his party for 9 people.
Yeah.
Now, you might say there's a difference there. One was you knew you were infected. The other one, you're still breaking the law because there's a price to pay. There's a £200 penalty. But, you know, is there a difference there? Are other people breaking the law like that? We did a poll with Express readers last night and they said 60% of people they felt weren't abiding by the law. But is there a difference there, what Corbyn was doing?
I think there is a difference between Corbyn's dinner party and what Ferrier did. What Ferrier did was unconscionable, absolutely. What Corbyn did was in breach of the law. And what annoyed me this morning was the Met, who have cast iron proof that all those people around that table were in breach of the law and thus should be slapped with a £200 fine. And the Met said, we're not doing anything about this. And 2 things annoyed me. Why? It plays absolutely into us and them, that there's one rule for them and one rule for us. Because if it was my mates, you could guarantee there'd be 200 quid lighter tonight. But the other thing is, it would have made a fantastic example, and it would have become a sort of, you know, we don't want to get Corbyn to do it because we'll, you know, it would go into the public consciousness that the rule of 6 is the rule of 6. It's not the rule of 9.
And interestingly, I thought Corbyn's case was interesting on 2 levels. One, you've just said they're not being pursued for that money, so there's one law for them and there's one law for us. And I also thought, there's another level here for one rule for them and one rule for me. If you can afford that £200 and it doesn't matter to you, well, there's a rule for them, a rule for us. I mean, if that £200 means a lot, you could not break the law. There's an element of you can break the law if you've got the money to be able to break the law as well. So I feel we're splitting between lots of them and us. And so that whole thing that, you know, you'd say, you know, the UK... Britain is founded on is the rule of law, that nobody is above it and we are all the same under it. This to me is breaking that down. That's why I feel so sad about it.
I mean, I think for me, I'm probably not the biggest fan of the whole idea of shopping your neighbours during during the course of this, and I don't sort of necessarily agree with some of the rules that are in place now, but I think you do have abide by them. It always reminds me of that scene in The Untouchables, where Elliot Ness has spent all that time enforcing the prohibition on alcohol, and then they come up to him at the end of it when he's just defeated Al Capone and said, "Oh, Mr. Ness, have just legalised alcohol. What do you think you're going to do now?" He says, "I think I'm going to take a drink." So I think that there is an element that we do have to live by it, by sort of whether or not we agree with them or not. That is what the law is. But I think it is a classic socialist thing. It is literally, they are the people who say one thing that's different for them, and everything, something, they know the effect is going to be different on other people. Socialism is going to impoverish people, but it's okay. I can say it from my, sort of palatial home in North London, because, I can afford a bit of socialism. It's only the rich who can afford socialism, after all. The rest of us just have to sort of have shades of Soviet Russia if Corbyn had ever got his way.
No,
so
no.
I think it's just classic from him.
Well, what we've always said, that statism is telling you what to do, whereas we believe in you having a say and everybody having a say. And I think this, I don't know if you saw the Sean Bailey interview a little bit earlier on, but he was talking about the red wall maybe falling in London, and he said, it's in the mind. So let's hear what Sean said a little bit earlier on.
We'll be able to break the red wall. The red wall is not a place, it's a state of mind. We can break the red wall down here in the south just in the same way we did in the north.
It's about a can-do attitude. It's about going out there and working hard, and that's what he's saying. The red wall could be smashed down with that attitude, and Sadiq is the person who's probably going to help that red wall collapse in London.
I'm not convinced. I think the London thing is a kind of schism at the heart of the Labour Party that always has been there, which is the Labour Party came out of the trade union movement and was a kind of valiant and noble effort to level the playing field, right? To level up, the kind of thing Boris wants to do again 200 years later. But then it was kind of hijacked by the rich noblesse oblige academics who wanted to use the workers, who were the real Labour Party, as kind of lab rats for their social experiments. And that kind of mentality still remains. If you look at the higher echelons of the Labour Party, who all send their kids to private schools, by the way, and live in Islington and live a different life to people in Blackburn and Grimsby or Hull or whatever.
I always think it's those who are studying the working class, don't understand it, wouldn't know if they fell over it, but they'd like to pontificate about it because they read this in a book about how those people live.
It's exactly that, yeah. But I think that Islington, I lived in Islington for a while. In fact, Jeremy Corbyn was my MP for a while. That is so part of London life. It's not going to change, I don't think, anytime soon, unless London changes.
Because, when you talk about, I think the first red wall that collapsed was in sort of outside London, your Essexes in the 1980s. That was the first red wall to collapse, wasn't it? The next one was sort of 2019 up north, but that was the, aspirational working class, as you say, wanting to set up. Success was a positive thing, set up their own businesses, sort of where you live out that way, isn't it?
So I think, I think Sean is right when he says the red wall was a state of mind, and it was a state of mind that had to be gotten over. And places like Essex, sort of clearly moved a long time ago, and now you can't see the Labour Party making great inroads anytime soon. But we set this our little blue collar conservatism group back up in 2013, and I remember sort of sitting in events where we were talking about the North is going to throw off the Labour Party, and you sat there in sort of Brexit wasn't even a word that had been invented, and I'm sitting there and I'm saying that the Labour Party will be kicked out of the North. It will happen. And I think I had to check myself, do I really believe that? Because this was a time. And I thought to myself, yes, I do, because there were not people were being taken for granted, people were not being properly represented. This was the social experiments of a North London Labour Party.
I remember
from the North.
We'd be having like dinners and chats and drinks and this, that, and the other, and we didn't know when it was going to happen. we just could see it was happening. So if I would look at the opposite side of the bench as the sort of Labour Party, then I'm thinking, God, you really don't represent them whatsoever. But I didn't know when that change was going to happen. You could see the sort of slow ebbing away of that Labour vote from those seats.
In 2010, throughout the Labour Party, I'd grown up with a, sort of Labour. It was, Eric Martlew stickers adorned every, sort of road crossing in the city. Every lamppost, you'd have Eric Martlew stickers. This was a red town, and it kicked the Labour Party out in 2010. A piece of the red wall punched through long before the rest. So it was happening.
But is it going to happen in London?
Look, I mean, London is a challenge, because I think if you talk about the Essex piece, there's clearly seats in Essex that were historically Labour but now solid Conservative. But there are seats in London that, over the same period, have made that move from being would have been a Conservative seat back in the 80s to now. So there is a real.
Well, look, we've had Boris. So we've had a Conservative mayor here. We've now got Sadiq. People don't seem happy with what Sadiq's doing, what he's doing to what is, an incredible global capital here. So will he get, kicked out? Sean Bailey's definitely the guy. He's out there, he's seeing people, he's got this drive. But will it change anytime soon, Paul?
I think it's different. The in the north, they certainly, where I grew up, I was in Blackburn. The people aren't really massively partisan. What they want is a fair shake, and they will vote for the party that gives them a fair shake. That's the main sort of political feeling. Whereas in London, it's not that. It's much more. They think if we vote Labour in the north, we get up in the morning and sing the Internationale or something. We don't. It's not like that, lads. But they've never been north, so they wouldn't know. But it's more, they choose their socialism like they choose to eat edamame beans or something like that, or it's not. It's a lifestyle choice for them,
I mean, to speak up a bit for London. I don't think it's all like there is a clique that runs the Labour Party that sit there in their comfortable North London settings and want to set this for everybody else. Where I think that Sean has a real chance is that whether it's the red wall mindset or whatever, Sadiq is running London into the ground. There were there is tough times because of COVID. And this is a guy who's making the wrong calls on everyone. This is a man who's pushing it further and further down. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of people outside of the
is he
North
saying
London dinner
anything
parties
at the moment to get London open back up? I mean, I come and get off the train at Euston and I'll go to get a taxi, and I am shocked. Now, a taxi's waiting 2 hours at Euston. Usually they'd be whooshing through and collecting people up. They'll say, I might have a couple of fares a day. They're saying, why would people come into London if the theatre's not open, if the restaurants aren't really open? They're having a really tough time. Is he out there championing the city, cheering it, shouting for it to do well and get back on its feet? Because I don't hear him.
The only message that seems to have come out of Sadiq so far is, London's knackered. Get used to it.
No way.
And Sean wrote this in a piece a few weeks ago, and put the cat among the pigeons a bit. But there's a sort of deafening silence coming out of from the Sadiq camp at the moment, and it's not.
Look, for most of us who don't live in London all the time, I've always seen London really in a country in its own right. It is so different from the rest of the country, and I great for it. The capital of finance, the capital probably of the law, capital of the sort of media, the political heartland as well. So it really is an engine for the whole of the country, and we should be proud of that. We just want the regions to also be able to prosper in their own ways. But for somebody to say, basically, oh, who cares, get used to it, it's,
It was the get used to it.
Get used to it, that is so wrong. I mean, he should be out there championing it, because around the globe, it is looked on as a global capital and, probably envied in a way, London. Crikey, if he can't champion this place, I am shocked. He needs to be booted out if he can't champion this absolute global capital.
Look, you can't deny that London, is an engine of the country, and Sadiq is North Red Dibner. You know, he's not a guy getting this working. He should be at the coalface demanding this city is opened up as possible, as much as it possibly can be, getting people back to work. And I think that's where Sean's chance comes in, because, you know, he's asleep at the wheel, and, you know, it's running off the road. I don't know what metaphors I'm using now, but you know,
all of them, I'd say,
I'd say
in one sentence.
Sean can do it, because Sadiq, you can't imagine a man to have let down a city more than what he's doing right now in London.
Well, I'm going to hear voice of the people. We're going, you know, who would you have at your cabinet, or in your cabinet, I should say, who isn't a politician? This is what voice of the people had to say.
If I could have anyone in the cabinet who wasn't a politician, he's actually died, but it would be Les Dawson, because I think he was witty, funny, but also was sharp. He had a good head on him.
If I could have anyone in my cabinet that wasn't a politician, I'd probably choose Jeremy Clarkson, because I think he's quite funny and has good views.
Les Dawson, I like that one. So, who would yours be?
If I could see anyone in the cabinet, so I mean, the first person that springs to mind is you know, Swedish epidemiologist Anders Tegnell. However, and that seems a little bit too political. For
He's
him.
the first person that springs to mind.
These are the times we live in.
All right.
So what I'm going to say is my final answer. Who I'd like to see is my personal hero, Roger Daltrey, lead singer of the Who.
You know, you took a joke from me. I was going to say, who? And you could have said, lead singer of.
Lead singer of. And, you know, absolutely Brexiteer, a man who's never lost touch with his working class roots, greatest frontman ever to have lived. Imagine him around the cabinet table.
Fantastic. Paul?
I would have, I'm trying to think of something witty, but I actually think I would have some proper people in the cabinet. I'd have the taxi driver who brought me here tonight. It was brilliant.
I bet you he had an opinion on a couple of things.
Absolutely right. And obviously he was a taxi driver, so he was right. And I'd have the bloke who sells me my coffee in the morning, right? Small businessman, talks to people, knows what's going on in real life, sort of thing. I'd have a cabinet full of proper people, not necessarily people who just went to Eton and Harrow and.
You see, so that's where I was coming from, where you were coming from, and I'd have to say somebody like my dad, who'd say we need to knock a few heads together here. Do you not know how, he'd say, the other half lives? Do you not understand what it's like to get up at this time in the morning and find this is working or that isn't working? So I'm afraid Jim McVeigh would have a lot to say at that cabinet table. Has he got your vote as well?
I know Jim. I'd vote for him all day long.
Dad, you got 3 votes here. You're all right. You never know. Yeah. Wait for that phone call. You could be in running the country before you know it. Now look, we're coming to the end of what has been a fantastic week. At least we think so. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been our Blue Collar Conservatism Conference. In fact, we'd like to have some feedback from you. Let us know what you liked, and also let us know what maybe you didn't like. We've had some great support, some great help, and obviously the Blue Boar here have been really accommodating and looked after us. So it's goodbye from us, but actually we're going to show some of the highlights on the Express website over the weekend. Enjoy. Thank you for joining us for the last 5 days for this, our first virtual conference. Blue Collar Conservatism is all about taking politics to the people, turning politics on its head and getting cabinet ministers to reply to you. If you've enjoyed it, then please subscribe, and you can also listen to our podcasts, bluecollarconversations.co.uk.